I don't think anybody's ever seen him that way. Seen Chris Evans.
Can I talk to you or not? No, never mind.
Yeah, there's only one person on.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that probably answers. I had asked Mona if she could sit near you, and if there was somebody on the chat, would you like her to handle it?
Oh, I can
Write
monitor
down
the chat
and
ask
if there are
any
questions. Okay.
I just sent that as a comment in the chat.
What?
Said if anybody online has a question, drop it in and I'll ask it live here
Okay. Oh, good.
in the room. So
Okay.
I'll try to monitor it the best I can.
Okay. Thank you.
Which I agree with. You can't just run up there and be sure you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lana.
Yeah.
And Ellen was hoping I might be able to read the chat over your shoulder if you needed some help. I got a neck problem. I'm not sure how successfully I'm going to be able to deal with the chat. Are you?
Well, so far there's only one.
What's the question? I can't even
No,
see
there's only
it.
one viewer. But the question will come in here and I can read it.
You can?
And I already said if you drop it in, I can manage.
You're sure?
Oh yeah, I've done this kind of stuff before.
Do you live in Colorado?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Remember that. I'm Lana.
He says he's okay.
That's wonderful.
Okay. So if you guys,
It was supposed to be like fake peanut butter, so you got it.
yeah, okay.
Made a sandwich for the kid. When the kid bit into it, he said, I didn't like it. So he gave
Okay.
you know, they eat peanut butter.
Ask you guys, have you taken, do you have something to write on and I think our plan is going to evolve with what people want, but my intention is to have a new to write something out.
Yes. I mean, there's
You're all
some
set?
ways, but you're right.
Oh, do you?
I will. You know, do you know Mike Farris?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
church. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. The bathrooms are right through that door back and on the right. And we hope that you'll stay and enjoy, or hop up and get some refreshments. This evening's program is sponsored by the church's Environmental Action Committee. Would members of the Environmental Action Committee stand up? Because I'm not a member and I figured they should be recognized. I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Juliet Varga. She is an internationally recognized expert in climate change and sustainability. Through her research, advocacy, and educational efforts, she is teaching at the state, national, and international level what it takes to understand and take action to mitigate climate change. Dr. Varga develops and uses interactive simulations in her work as an educator at UMass Lowell, where she's a professor of environmental science, directs the Climate Change Initiative, and co-directs the RISK Institute for Sustainability and Energy. These simulation-based interactive approaches enable decision makers at all levels of society, from students to policymakers, to learn about the complex climate and energy systems. Research shows these simulations also motivate evidence-based climate action. Professor Varga received her BA from Colby College, her Master's of Science from Cornell University, and her PhD from the University of New Hampshire. She has published widely, been interviewed extensively, and is the recipient of numerous awards. Please welcome Professor Juliet. I just want to take a moment to say this evening is really not about me and not about my work. It's about you. So I want to take a moment to first say thank you. This is actually my first time in a Universalist congregation space, and it's beautiful. I feel very welcome and honored to be here. And I also feel very welcome and honored to be among so many people who, like me, I think in this moment, are looking for what we can do in the face of really, I don't even want to say the word unprecedented because I'm so sick of it. But really in the face of extraordinary challenges. I find myself, I'll just tell you a little bit about my personal story, and I think my background, actually, my training, my scientific training and background is not in simulation, system dynamics, climate change. It's in biogeochemistry and environmental science. And I think it's partly because of my personal history, which is not something that scientists talk about much. But my parents were Holocaust survivors from Hungary. And I find myself in this moment, in these days, thinking very much about what my family went through and how I can do as much as I can today to make sure that my children are not going to go through that. And I think that in reflecting on that, that's really what's motivated me since the early 2000s to take what really was at the time a big academic risk, shift away from my area of training and towards translating science into action. So today, what I want to do is really be here for you in terms of however, what you want to get out of this evening. I'm going to share with you one of the interactive simulations that I've helped develop and that I've done a lot of research on its impact in partnership with a group at MIT and Climate Interactive, but I'm going to do a light version of that because I think what I really want to do is be here to support whatever action we can come out of this evening ready to take together. And as I look around the room, I see people from organizations and from our government. Thank you, Senator Barrett, for joining us this evening. That you are already doing so much, and I have so much to learn from you. And I think the only way that we're going to succeed is from working and learning together as quickly as we can. Okay, so with that, I want to give you just a little bit. We're just up the road in Lowell. And I want to share just a little bit about, I am so grateful in this moment to be at UMass Lowell. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing. So I want to share a little bit about that, very little, very quickly. And I want to give you also a kind of an overview of what I'm thinking we're going to do tonight, although again, I'm here for you. And if I can answer questions or we end up going in a different direction, that's okay with me. So, brief welcome and intros. We're going to do this En-ROADS Lite, which I know several of you have seen this model before. It's about climate, it's a climate action simulator, we call it. I was thinking of talking about different levels of action, and what I mean by that is from personal to national or international. Just to think about where do we, each one of us has different systems that we're part of. Each one of us has different opportunities for action. So hopefully you have a piece of paper and something to write with, because part of this is going to be thinking about who is in your social network? Where do you have potential for influence and action? Where is your heart drawn? I think Ellen asked me when she first asked me to come here, she said, well, we want to know what the single most important climate action is we can take. And I was like, oh, I know that question. I ask myself that every single day. And of course, the answer is that question, the answer to that question is going to be different for each one of us. So we need to do some thinking about what the answer to that question is for each one of us. And then we're going to actually commit to taking actions. Okay? That's what our next steps is. Next steps part is. So I just want to, again, part of why, so I had a research affiliate associate position, I don't know what to call it, at MIT. I love my colleagues at MIT. I spent a fair amount of time there. But I have to say, in this moment, I'm particularly proud of being at UMass Lowell. We are far ahead. In terms of actually taking action on climate change, actually turning our campus into a living lab, and doing it in a way that is centered in climate justice and environmental justice. So our campus literally is physically embedded in, so you can see dark blue is our campus. All of the other colors represent environmental justice communities. You cannot live on campus, go to class on North Campus, then to class on South Campus without being part of environmental justice communities. And so our approach to climate action, which we have embarked on far before the private institutions had, because I was involved in those conversations. 2007, we committed to net zero emissions by 2050. We have been on the road to achieve those net zero emissions since that time, even though we didn't know how we would do it. And we're doing it in a way that brings our community with us in partnership with our community. And I'm involved in several of those efforts, and I have some ideas from that work in terms of how to, I know that a lot of us who tend to come to these kinds of events are, in climate action groups, but often we're just talking to each other. And we need to stop that and get into talking to other people. And so we have a lot of ideas about how to do that. We've had $120 million a year in sustainability and energy R&I in research and innovation funding. Well, my NSF grant just got terminated. I expect my DOE grant is probably about to. So those numbers may be changing, but we are working hard to look for alternatives in partnership with the private sector and with the state. We are very confident that we have an opportunity to support the state's efforts. And I want to get through this quickly, but I just point out too that the Climate Change Initiative, which I lead, now has 62 faculty members from across 22 academic departments cutting across the entire university. So we're actually rated #1 in sustainability out of all of higher ed in Massachusetts. We're about to achieve platinum status according to the HE STARS program. So just mention that as, we're just up the road, and often I think that because we don't look like a green campus sometimes, people don't think of us as green, but actually we're quite green and we're very proud of it. And also we're a resource. We want to be here as a resource for you. So today, I thought that, just out of curiosity, how many people have played with En-ROADS before or seen En-ROADS before? So a few people. With the En-ROADS model, this model. Okay, so a few people. Okay, and before, we're a large enough group that I don't think we have time for to go around the room with intros, but that's fine. So I think we'll just dive right in. So if you If you've seen it before, we'll do this pretty quickly, so bear with us, please. And if you haven't, quick intro. This is a model. We're going to look at the interactive version. Just to orient you briefly to it, on this side of the screen, you see two graphs. On this side is a graph that shows you the energy supply. So going from 2000 to 2025 is the past, right? It's observations from actual reality. Going forward depends on the decisions that you make here tonight. So going forward from 2025 to 2100, you see coal, oil, natural gas, renewables in this case is going to be wind, solar, and hydro. Pink is bioenergy. The part of the model that I've contributed to is actually the bioenergy sector, so I'm happy to dive into that in more detail if you want to look into that. Cyan is nuclear, and then not shown here would be new zero carbon energy. So this is being like fusion or thorium fission that's kind of coming out of the lab slowly, and if we invest in R&D, it could plug into the grid soon. These are the net emissions that result from land use changes and also from this energy mix and the carbon that's emitted from this energy supply from fossil fuels predominantly, but also methane and nitrous oxide. So those are non-CO2 gases that are often potent greenhouse gases. So from agriculture, for example. And the temperature rise that we expect, ballpark, by 2100 is about 3.3 degrees C above pre-industrial times, or 6 degrees Fahrenheit if you speak American. But really neither one of those things means a lot to most people. So I guess maybe just before we dive in, any thoughts? I'm assuming you're here tonight because you're partly, you're worried about this issue to some extent. Otherwise, why bother taking a Sunday night to do this? I guess when you think about kind of what keeps you up at night or what worries you about climate change, what would be some examples if we don't take action that you worry about? Yeah.
One that struck me was when we were in Northern Europe, in Norway.
Yeah.
They're worried about the Gulf Stream reversing direction because of the water as the ice caps melt, coming in and actually change it. And then that would actually cool Northern Europe while the rest of the world's getting warmer.
Yeah, and it would also dramatically change monsoons and
it would be a huge change.
It would be a massive disruption, and we would see places especially that rely on rain-fed agriculture, who knows, suffering a huge amount potentially. Other thoughts? So that's one example.
Desertification in Southern Europe?
Desertification. Okay, in Southern Europe, but also in the southwestern United States and parts of the western United States, yeah. Anything else, yeah?
I'd say it's less environmental and more social. It's like, how do you have conversations with kids or grandkids or something like that and explain to them that you saw the train coming and ignored it? Whatever it is, messaging to future generations.
Yes. So I'm not going to dive into this right now because I think there's so many things for us to talk about tonight, but I just want to point out that if you want to dive into En-ROADS, it's freely available, you can do so. And if you click on this impacts, you can see there's a massive list of impacts that are now available to explore. And you can see if you pull one up, so let's say that I look at one that happened to be in LA when the wildfires broke out. Very upsetting. So you can look at something like, what will the impact be of wildfires under this 3.3 degrees C future compared to the current scenario. So we're seeing, compared to current reality, something like, 2 more weeks of wildfire danger per year in LA, and in places like Phoenix, up to a month more coming forward. But you can look at things like sea level rise maps, food declines in agricultural production, etc. Okay, but I think that you put it best, which is that to leave, how do you have a conversation with your kids or grandkids about this future, and let's do something else. So just to go back to that, I want to ask you, what is your favorite climate action, or what's a climate action that, you know, we don't want this 3.3 degrees C future world. We want to, and does anybody know what the international target is? Agreed upon target from the Paris Agreement or from
1.5.
1.5. So no more than 1.5 to 2 degrees. So it's 2 degrees C limit above pre-industrial was the Paris Agreement, as close to 1.5 as possible. We did hit 1.5 last year, although that's just 1 year. It's not a long-term average. So we're not there yet, but 1.5 is. No, I don't think 1.5, I can't look at my students in the face and say we're going to hit 1.5 at this point. You know, 2, I'm hoping for. Okay, so with that said, so 2 means impacts are coming. A colleague of mine from Mass Amherst is one of the people who discovered the Western Arctic ice sheet is likely committed to collapse. You know, there are things that are going to happen at 2 that we have to start preparing for. But it's an easier, it's more possible to prepare for than that 3.3 for sure. So my question for you is, in all of this, what's your top climate solution? If you could just turn to a neighbor, and your job is to agree on one. Which I know in my congregation would be a really tough sell. So if you could try, that might mean you have to convince your neighbor a little bit. This could be the top thing that you've heard about, or what you hear the buzz, you think the buzz is about, what you hear people talking about. What's your top climate solution? And just to ground you a little bit, you know, these are the levers that we can pull in En-ROADS. So we can encourage or discourage any of the energy supply, coal, oil, natural gas, bioenergy, renewables, which again in our case is wind, solar, hydro, nuclear. We can invest in fusion. We can put a price on carbon, which has been proposed in the Massachusetts legislature several times. When we do have a price on carbon, it just doesn't cut across the entire economy, and Senator Barrett can fill us in, I'm sure, that he's cooking up to get us going on that. We have improving energy efficiency of transport, which would be things like including, I did an awesome bike ride the other day from work to home, which is Somerville, coming through Carlisle, which was the favorite one that I did so far. So it does include things like that, biking, walking, but it also improved, you know, gas cars. Electrification of transport, energy efficiency of buildings, so weatherizing, insulating your home, getting that heat pump, or network geothermal, which we're working on at UMass Lowell. We're not going to go with the population and economic growth for now, if you don't mind, but if you want to, we can look at that. It's just. And then we also have the possibility of sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, whether you do that with a nature-based approach, like planting trees, or improving carbon soil sequestration, or if you do it with a technical approach, like direct air capture, carbon capture and storage for coal, oil, natural gas would be over here. You could do that too. Or you have something like mineralization, like enhanced mineralization to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. Don't worry if all of this is nonsense to you. All you want to do is think about your favorite thing. We can also cut emissions by switching to plant-based diets. You might have heard of less beef, less dairy, less ice cream, unfortunately. Oat-based ice cream. Or improving the efficiency with which we fertilize our agricultural systems and reducing food waste. We can cut the waste and leakage coming from basically from our natural gas pipelines and from our extraction of fossil fuels, and we can protect our forests. Okay, go nuts. Your favorite thing. What's your favorite climate action? And try to convince your neighbor, and you've got 5 minutes to do it. 100% agree. And that is key insight, super important for anything that we're going to do tonight, and we're going to talk about that. What about if we had those policymakers who are listening to us, what would we be telling them to do? Yeah.
More EVs.
Okay, so electrified transport. Okay, what else?
Which part of that's infrastructure for EVs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Being able to recharge and plug in.
Yes, I hear you. Got my poles outside.
We thought that you really need almost a huge PR campaign. People need to understand that various things that are going on are because of, this is causing it. And until they believe that, understand that, they're not gonna do anything.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got a need for, okay, so I'm thinking about things that are in the model and things that are not in the model. And I'm with you there. Like I'm 100%, because there's a lot of things that are not in this model. So not in the model. Protect democracy from the union, protect democracy. Not in the model, raise awareness. So part of what I want to do tonight is give you some tools to help you raise awareness. And hopefully empower, you're already empowered to do that, but to help reset those wheels a little bit. So 100% raise awareness. What else? What about solutions that maybe we can check in the model, and we'll dive into some of these more bigger scale, not in the model things. Yep.
We went global, we said electrify everything.
Okay, so we've already got transport. Let's talk about heating, buildings and industry. Cooling, okay. Buildings and industry. Yeah.
But efficiently, you want to use heat pumps.
Yes. 100%. Okay. What else? Yes.
Protect the trees.
Okay, protect the trees. Great. So,
What was that?
what else? Yes.
Well, you have a slider for coal there, so we need to push back on
Okay.
less coal.
Less
Use
coal.
Less coal.
You're not telling me to do clean coal. Okay. I'm here to listen. Yeah.
I think we should protect and expand the wetlands.
Okay, wetlands. So nature-based solutions for. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna it's just shorthand for me. Nature-based solutions for carbon dioxide removal. Yep.
We didn't talk about this, but mass transit.
Okay, that goes with efficiency of transit. Okay, I need two more. Okay, methane. So we're going to do waste and leakage.
Things like Bitcoin are actually causing data centers.
Data centers. Okay, so
And
energy.
particularly, I don't think of Bitcoin as being very productive. You're just spending all this energy to create some tokens and cryptocurrency that works.
Okay, I'm gonna put that under energy efficiency, if that's okay. Give me, one more. Cut food waste. Okay, food waste. All right, let's try this. We've got a lot to do here.
I think Bitcoins go under waste. I said, I think Bitcoins go under waste.
Yeah, I don't want to go there. Okay, so just to give you, let's see how we want to do this. I'm going to start with protecting forests and nature-based carbon dioxide removal. And I want you to watch what happens. So first of all, before I pull a lever and we play around with what the model tells us, what do you think protecting forests will do? How much will temperature come down from 3.3? 0.2.
Yeah, less than that.
Less than that. Okay. Who thinks more than that?
But that's
Okay. 0.5, 1. Instead of 3.3, we get 2. Let's see. Well,
globally or?
this is a global model.
Okay.
This is a global model.
So what percentage of the forest are we talking about having more than we've got now?
Yeah. So we can go into detail. I'm not going to go into detailed settings right now. We're just going to do this. We're doing En-ROADS Light. We're going to do this really quickly. So I'm going to pull this. and you can see what happens there. So on the side of emissions,
Oh, yeah.
As you start in
so
yes.
one thing that we're doing, so I'm going to play that again. Okay, so as we protect forests, what's the form of energy that we're impacting the most? If you look at the colors on the left-hand side, yes, so we're reducing bioenergy use because we're protecting forests, and some bioenergy comes from wooded forests, right? So that's a good thing. But does this have a big impact? Okay, this is a little bit one that, one of the things that is a pet peeve for me in the model is that we don't have some of the feedbacks that are in the Earth system in the model. So some of them are there, but not all of them are there. So this is not to say that you should not protect forests. But this is to say that Massachusetts claiming that we're going to get to net zero with the help of our natural and working lands taking 15% of our emissions, because Massachusetts' plan is actually to get to 85% reduction of emissions compared to 1990 values, not 100%. And I don't think that's a safe bet, because first of all, well anyway, we can dive into that, but this is not a high leverage action in terms of, it's a high leverage action in terms of protecting our ecosystems, our biodiversity, our water quality, all of those things. It is critical that we protect our forests. What protecting our forests does not do is take care of the fact that we are emitting 60 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. There are no forests that can take care of that problem for us. Okay, next thing on our list was to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere with nature-based solutions. So I'm going to pull that lever. Ready? And watch again. Okay, so it helps for sure. But again, 0.1 degrees C. And if we look at, are we touching the energy mix here? No. Okay. So if you think about this as, I have a cup of tea here. Emissions are pouring into my cup, and in the tea is the carbon in the atmosphere. It's a finite atmosphere. It's a finite atmosphere, and there's carbon dioxide and all the other greenhouse gases obey the law of conservation of mass. So if I emit, they accumulate into the cup. They accumulate into the atmosphere. When do we need to stop emitting in order to keep the level low? Now. As soon as possible. The longer we postpone emitting, cutting emissions, as long as there are some emissions, that those gases are accumulating, right? The water in the cup is going up. So we need to think about actions that take emissions down now, as soon as possible. Okay, so nature-based solutions in protecting forests helps, but they're not going to solve our problem. Let's go to electrified transport. And this is granted a global model, so I just want to, with the caveat that it's a global grid. The global grid is dirtier than Massachusetts grid. In Massachusetts, this would have a little bit more of an impact.
Does that include air?
Air. Air is sorry, airplanes. Yes, it does include airplanes. Yes. That's a lot harder. So this is electrification of transport. It's not counting on technologies that are not currently available. So no, from that perspective, we're not assuming that you can have large-scale flights electrified. Okay, so we're at 3 degrees. Not a future I want to hand off to my kids. No offense. Buildings and industry. So this is like what? This is a network geothermal system in Lowell that we're working on. This is getting a ground source air source heat pump. This is electrifying industry where possible. Are we ready to pull this lever? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Change the mix, but not the number.
Nothing.
question?
Yeah.
So that, because you have 4 blue lines there, is the 3.0 the cumulative effect, or is it just
3.0 is expected temperature outcome by 2100.
using all 4 things simultaneously?
Cumulative, yes. These are all the levers that we've pulled so far. We have waste and leakage and food waste. So I'm gonna, with your permission, I'm gonna pull hard on those levers. And again, these are going to affect non-CO2 gases like methane and nitrous oxide, which are certainly important. Okay, so these are so many of these gases, well, methane at least, is a relatively short-lived gas, and in the near term has about an 84 times the potency of CO2 on a per mass basis. I'm going to pull this one. Okay, so we're making progress. What's the problem? If we look at the data, what's the problem that we have?
Changing our energy supply.
Okay. What do we need to do? And we had a suggestion to pull back on coal. Coal is here. Oil and natural gas are here. So do you see my cursor?
No.
This is coal, this is oil, and this is natural gas. So we can pull back on coal. Is there anything we can do to pull back on all of them?
Converting electricity some other way. Actually, yes, and converting to using electricity alone doesn't solve the problem.
No, because we can produce electricity with any
You
of
have
these
to produce
fuels.
the electricity
Yes.
with renewables.
Yes.
So, renewables.
Yeah, increase renewable.
Okay.
How about, I think you need to get rid of the carbon, you need to install more of a carbon price.
Okay.
I think that would.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So with the carbon price, does everybody know how that works?
No.
So I've learned the hard way that when you're teaching high school kids or talking to high school kids, you can show up with monopoly money and you can do this game where you do a carbon price with no. College students, I have to stop at the bank and give them cash. So when I'm doing carbon pricing in my class, I stop at the bank, I pull out more money than I'm used to, and I show up in class with a couple $100, and I divvy it out to my students. And we start off, my students generally, a lot of them are first generation to college, they're, some 40% of them, their carbon footprints are pretty low compared to the average American on average, most of them. So if we had a system where you put a price on carbon, what we do in Massachusetts in our power sector, you would have a case where you're paying for this price at the fuel, basically. There's a surcharge put on the fuel. It's probably passed to the customer. But one way to do this is to have money collected and put in a trust fund and go back to go back to people, basically. And if you are, like British Columbia did this, if you emit less than the average household, you actually make money off the scheme. If you emit more than the average household, you pay into the system, you pay more than you're getting back. And so
it pays everybody the same.
It pays everybody the same.
The charge is based on how much carbon.
Exactly. Thank you. And so you're basically you're creating incentives to cut emissions or to cut carbon fuel use. In Massachusetts, there was at one point a proposal for a $40 a ton price on carbon, which increased $5 a ton every year, I believe it was. And then it was reassessed at 5 years. Should we implement that globally, lead the way and see what happens? Right? What do you think, Senator Barrett?
Let's give it a shot.
All right, let's try it. Okay. All right, let's give it a shot. And so this is a way because we don't want to create a shock where there's this massive price on carbon, right? So if we start, the global average right now is $5 a ton. If we start with 40, I'm going to replay that. What's happening to the energy mix?
It's changing.
Okay, so we're letting this phase in over 10 years. I'm going to assume that we're just going to keep on going. So you imagine that the carbon price is going to keep on going up, but you're using less and less fossil fuel, so you're actually paying, you're not paying more and more into it per se, right? Because you don't have to pay if you don't emit. So if I let this phase in over time, like say over the entire century, over decades, eventually we're going to end up with something like $350 a ton, ballpark. I'm going to let that go in over 8 years. I'm doing this right.
75.
And I'm going to have it start in 2030. So that's ballpark.
Why wait so long to start it?
I don't know.
And so coal goes away almost.
Okay.
That's the price of energy?
No, this is the price of carbon. Good question. I want to just point out too that in this case you would have, here we have revenue and cost. So we're pulling in on the order of $15 trillion a year, and we can then that money can go back to people, right? That money, that you have a decision of what to do with that money by 2100. It ramps in over time, and the cost of electricity will depend on the source. So the cost of electricity from oil goes up, from coal it goes up, but from renewables it goes down, and then stays fairly steady.
There's 20 of scale.
Sorry?
Is that because they're scaling up, so there's more,
Yeah.
it costs less because you're doing
Yes.
much more of it?
Yes, and that's a good point that I want to come back to later. Okay, I want to stop here because I said I was going to do Emrose Light, and we're at the time for that to end. But I just want to point out we're at 2.1 degrees C. So I want to give you a round of applause because that's a much better future than what we were starting with. Can you just join me here? Okay, so and of course we don't want to be. I hear the hesitation around applause too because let's be grounded in reality here. And that's why I brought my band. So this is, in some of you, if you're like into systems thinking like I am, you might think of this is like an analogy that, a metaphor actually that, well, Dr. Martin Green Jr. didn't talk about rubber band, but it's kind of the same idea that he was talking about, which is how many people feel like this is a bit overwhelming, like wow, there's a lot we need to do. There is no, believe it or not, despite all the things you hear on the news, there's no global benevolent dictator, right? So that means that this is up to you and me. There's nobody who's going to do this, right? We need to do this. So for me, that's, if I think about the rubber band, that's coming down here. My reality, when I really think about this problem and also think about our current reality in this country, it's not just tomorrow's going to be a little bit, like today pretty much, but not that different. It's like, wow, this is heavy, this is tough, it's down here. But if I let myself have audacious hope for the future, my vision of the future goes up here, right? And it's the tension in that system. If you think about this reality, oh, it's not that bad, and tomorrow's just going to be pretty much like today, which situation has more energy in it? This one? Right? And so I think that's really our challenge right now, today, especially if we have our eyes open to the challenges facing our democracy. Can we walk around, and I'm asking you this because I don't have the answer to it, can we walk around with that tension?
So I don't understand the analogy with rubber band.
Okay, great, thank you for asking, yes. So the analogy is to have our eyes open to our current reality and face that current reality, which is the lower part of the rubber band, and let that kind of actually weigh us down. Let us actually, feel that. And the upper part of the rubber band is your hope for the future, right? what your vision is, and I think about that image of him sitting in Birmingham jail behind the bars, his eyes open to the oppression around him, but thinking of a dream. And he talked about being creatively maladjusted, not allowing oneself to adjust to a society, but adjusting to the society would be your hope for the future is down here, right? So it's like, can you hold this dissonance, these two realities? This is the action that we need to take. This is my hope for the future. Can you have your eyes open to the reality and still have hope for the future and use that tension for change?
To pull you up.
To pull us all up. To pull us all up, to use that tension for change. And so I think that's the challenge that I feel like we face today, especially. And so I want to invite you to just take a moment. So I think all of our eyes are open to what's happening. I want to invite you to just take a moment, and since we are in a place of worship, I think it's a special place to do this, to just close our eyes and literally for a minute, let go of all of the nonsense and imagine what would it look like to achieve this or better outcome. What is this future of successful climate action with a strong and thriving democracy? Your most audacious hope. What does it look like? We're here together. So what does it look like? And if you could just go there, and I want you to think. Take a few breaths. And what do you see in this future where we have succeeded in protecting our democracy, and we've succeeded in taking Massachusetts to real net zero? And we can tell our children and grandchildren what we did. What are you seeing, feeling, hearing? What are the conversations that you're having in this place? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? And if we slowly come back to 2025, and let's think about what we can do. And I think that one of the questions, one of the questions that was raised when I first got here was like, why should we take climate action when we have all these other things that are threatening us? And I hear that. What I would propose to you is that climate action offers us an opportunity to do what we call multi-solving, a term that was invented by my colleague Beth Owen. She has a whole institute now called Multi-Solving Institute. You can check out if you want. And I think of this as multi-solving climate action and democracy. So how can we take climate action now and together in a way that strengthens our democracy too? Okay? So I mentioned that En-ROADS is a global model. We're hoping to build a model at UMass that is similar to the state, but we're not there yet. But there's no global decision maker, right? So there's no one who's going to take action at the global level so it's up to us, as I said. And I want you to, there's a lot of different places where we can take action, and there's a lot of, both climate action and action to protect our democracy. And so what we're going to do in a moment is we're going to ask you to consider at least 2 levels of action. So I broke this down, and there's lots of ways to break this down, but I broke it down earlier today as personal or, an argument with my husband, my house, which we have plenty of. Community, especially around climate action. So community or social network. So I want you to think that it could be this congregation, but it could be other communities that you're involved with, and it could be a social network that reaches to an international social network, which I think is really critical right now, that the rest of the world hears that we're not abandoning this work. We have action at the state level, which is very critical, as I'm sure Senator Barrett would tell us, that our policymakers need to hear from us now more than ever. They are facing tremendous challenges, and climate action may not be at the top of the list. And then, of course, we have national, which, again, we are not abandoning. We need to be ready to move on the national level. So we're going to do this in a moment. Just to kind of get us all on the same page, I thought I would give you some examples of what I think of on these different levels, but you probably have better ideas than me. So on the personal level, and you might think, oh, well, that doesn't really make that much of a difference. It's just one person. There's taking advantage of the mass save incentives. There's getting an EV, all the more EV incentives. There's changing your food habits. There's getting solar. The point of this is not that you're going to adjust your own carbon footprint. The point of this is to do it in a way that brings other people with you, to lead by example, to do it in a social way, and also to show our policymakers and all of our, our private sector, the private sector that's involved in the energy transition, that we are on board. We're taking advantage of these incentives. Somebody said, you mentioned that economies of scale. We need to move down the learning curve to cut costs. And every time we do one of these actions, we're moving down that curve. We're learning how to do these things cheaper. In fact, I'm thinking of a network geothermal system. The second loop in Framingham is going to cost half of what the first loop cost. So the more EVs we build, the more solar we install, we're going to get better at doing this more cheaply. It's important to do that. And I mentioned demonstrating incentives, support for existing incentives. There's also just, frankly, changing reality on the ground, which is one thing, right? So once we change reality on the ground, it becomes a lot harder for federal policies to undo that change. There's community and social network. So here are the key questions that you need to be thinking about. I don't have the answers to these. Who do you know? Do you know people in red or purple states? Do you know people who are red or purple, ways of thinking, ways of being in the world, which is great. We need to talk to them. What are their positions on climate action? And also, I think, especially, it's a lot more fun to do this together. Is somebody willing to do something with you just because you're an awesome person and they want to be with you? At the state level, you might think about which organizations, and it's really state and national. Which organizations do you want to join? Who's in the room here part of an organization that has national or state level reach? Do you want to say a word or two about your organization so I can shut up for a minute? Who wants to give, yeah?
We're members of Mothers Out Front.
Mothers Out Front.
So local, state, and national, all working for all of those things.
Okay, Mothers Out Front. Who else? Yeah.
League of Women Voters.
Okay, League of Women Voters.
Voter rights and access and climate as well. So.
Great. Who else? Yeah.
I used to be involved with 350.
350.
Yeah, actually 350 Mass is a separate independent entity in the state, but 350.org.
Okay. Yeah.
Regional Extinction Rebellion.
Okay, Extinction Rebellion. Any others? Okay. So there's resources here in the room then to ask questions. I recently joined Indivisible Somerville. I was very active in Mothers Out Front for a long time. So those are, being connected to an organization does help. You can get information. You don't have to be the expert in everything, right? You can just be like, you can do your part and be connected to what's going on by people who have more time to do it. And also because we're building an organization with social infrastructure needed to respond. At the state level, do we need to be calling you? Senator Barrett? we need to be on the phone, right, with our policymakers and asking them we need to show that we're committed to existing policies and to strengthening those, I believe. And the national level, that's true as well. And we need to protect existing policies of democracy, et cetera. So here, again, if you can take 5 minutes or so to do this exercise, consider at least 2 levels of action, so personal, household, community, social, network, state or national. What's one thing based on what you see in En-ROADS? What's one thing that you could take at those levels? And maybe it's not even in En-ROADS, maybe it's connected to the policy part of it and the democracy part of it. So we can have those policies that we see in En-ROADS as being valuable. And how can you extend your impact to others? So if you could just take a moment to write down a couple of ideas, and then we'll check in with our neighbors about them. I wanted to say, and this is the part where this is like our next steps part, so I want to hear from everybody if possible. Like, what are we going to do? And I have to tell you this, but the social science research shows that so first of all, there's this really big gap between what people say they're going to do and what they actually do. Yeah. So, we want to close that gap, okay? Right? Because we want, like at this point, like, I don't know, if you want to be talking to your kids and I want to be talking to my kids, we need to be able to tell them something. So, the research shows that to close the gap, you need to write down a specific action that you're going to do. And you need to share, so date other people involved, so what you're going to do, who you're going to do it with, and when you're going to do it by. And you need to share that publicly. The good news is that we're here together. Okay, so could you take a few minutes again and think really concretely about this? And maybe we can hear a little bit from people to get some ideas going. People have a good idea about what they want to do. Do you have something that you want to do? Yeah.
We want to decarbonize the entire town of Carlisle's municipal operations over a 25-year period. And we are working with the state through the Climate Leader program. Mr. Senator, you can walk out. So, we've already accomplished some things. We have applied, a proposal, made our application. We have been selected, and we were notified this past Friday. And so it's in the public domain. And what we need to do now is to work specifically within the town and all the different entities within the town to execute this decarbonization plan that the select board has already agreed to, both for buildings as well as for the vehicle fleet. And that includes all the things that are in the school as well, right, for the whole town. And so that's what, from a personal side, that's what I'm committing to. The dates are already specified in the plans that we have. With specific people, so the select board, town administrator, town sustainability coordinator, it's already written down. We have to do any extra work on this. And it has been shared publicly. We actually, at the event that was held last Sunday, tried to advertise it as best we could to the folks that came to the special day.
Fantastic. So,
a lot of folks in town helped to do that.
okay, and just to like bring it in, anything specific that you're going to do to move that forward in the next few weeks?
Well, I put my application for another 3-year term. So it's up to the select board to let me do that.
All right,
and
that's awesome.
if they choose someone else, I'll just help out on the side.
Fantastic. All right, so great example. That's a tough one to follow. Any other examples of actions? Yeah.
I think on the national level, I think we need to support midterm candidates in the 2026 election to flip the House, because if we don't, there won't be changes in federal policy. And so much, we can do a lot in Massachusetts, but the federal policy is 50 times bigger.
Yeah.
So that's campaigning, that's supporting financially, it's knocking doors and wherever, it's
Okay,
making
so
sure that those elections are massive change.
okay, and again, like great example of lots of things that we can do and opportunities for who, what, when, right? You could think, I'm buying next week, I'm going to, and Concord Indivisible is a great example of an organization you could get some support. Am I doing that right? Like, so that's a great example of an organization you could connect with to have support doing that, if that's an action you want to do. Yep.
One of the problems with living in Massachusetts is that you, in terms of the representatives and so on, you're always talking to the choir.
Yeah,
aren't you?
right.
Okay, so there's a group called Force Multiplier.
Yes.
You may have heard of it. That's a group of people got together and they raise money, and then they go to various races around the country that we think would, you know, say $100,000 could make a real difference. And you can sign up to hear these people, the politicians, come talk. And heard Nancy Pelosi, you know, and a number of the judge in Wisconsin was one, you know, and this you know, her campaign manager got up there and said we could beat Elon Musk, you know. And I got it, he was right.
This is great research.
Yeah. It's called Force Multiplier.
Force multiplier, so you could connect with, join,
Yep.
go to a meeting of Force.
Yeah, it's all online.
It's all online, okay.
Zoom's great. Yep.
Okay. Great. Yeah.
So, I don't want to be, I'm a little hesitant to say this because it's like trying to find the silver lining in
Yeah.
something terrible. But cheap plastic stuff is going to get a lot more expensive. And somehow if we can leverage that moment into saying, you don't need cheap plastic stuff. You don't want to be buying cheap plastic Christmas toys for your children. You know, we don't need that cheap plastic stuff. So somehow or another seize this opportunity where that stuff is going to become less available and more expensive, and somehow turn that moment into a realization that that isn't what we wanted anyway.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say, Ken, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's like, it could even be like, we're heading into some difficult economic times, even writ large, right? And so
what
can
do we
we,
learn from that?
what do we learn from that? Can we engage in a cultural shift or social norms?
We didn't want that stuff anyway. It was making our environment unhealthy, it was making our children unhealthy, it wasn't educational, we didn't need that stuff, so.
Okay.
Yeah, piggybacking on this several ways. Yeah, clothing, you know, that's also will be clothing, but we don't need to buy new clothing, we can buy used clothing. In fact, I know your daughter has stuff like that. And in fact, when our Road to Sustainability Day last year, we had this wonderful fashion show. I still remember Katie was wearing all these recycled clothes. But that's still something that you can do on an individual level and also persuade your family members, including your teenage kids who want the latest things. I don't know. But, you know, we don't need as much clothing and we can wear things more and try these things. But that's what But I have heard that textiles take a lot of energy and water. Yeah, so it is an industry that's very, yeah, I was kind of adding.
Let's hear two more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
So 350 is supporting the Make Polluters Pay bill in the state legislature, and there is a petition to the governor that I have signed, and I would like to invite everyone here to sign it if you're so inclined.
What's it for?
Sorry?
What is it?
What is it?
What is it?
It's establishing a climate super fund for the state of Massachusetts, which is proportional to the emissions produced by big big fossil fuel companies, to work on the impacts of climate change that are going to be affecting our state. New York and Vermont passed a version of this in the last legislative cycle. So if we don't take the companies on and get the money that we deserve to fix these issues that we're going to have with sea level rise and various adaptation issues, we're going to lose out.
Yeah.
So it's essentially a tax on them for their carbon use.
It passed,
yes, carbon.
They're passed already.
Yes.
It's not going forward like a carbon price would be.
Okay.
And it's like a super fund, like the pollution super fund.
Exactly.
Right.
You've done this damage, now pay for it.
And help us pay for it.
Where can we sign up?
It's on the web. I can pull that up after this is over, and,
Yeah.
or email it to everybody, or yeah.
Is there an email list for participants? No. Okay, we can put it up. I'll have you come and just throw it on here. Okay, yeah.
just sort of piggybacking on that, I live in Lowell, to get the various organizations to work together. So there's 350, there's Solidarity, there's the Democratic City Committee, and probably there are things at UMass Lowell the students are involved in. If you could get them all kind of pulling on the same oar at the same time to try to pass something like that.
Yeah, 100%. It's a better organization of, the kind of meta organization of other organizations. Yeah, and we are happy to support that kind of thing, especially if it's linked to climate sustainability at UMass Lowell. In fact, we're expecting to host more community meetings around different issues shortly. So feel free to touch base with me, yeah?
So I live here in Carlisle in a very old house, 1700s. And it's always been, in the back of my head, trying to make it more efficient. And my new friend Sue, next to me, I've been doing research in heat pumps and putting some splits in so I don't have to heat the whole house. And she is now telling me to talk to Bob over here. So my night is made just by these little connections and meeting you. So that is definitely, I was already getting numbers for them. So I think I'm going to now learn about some rebates maybe. So anyway, that's my big commitment. It's a drafty old house. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
So then, just to, if I could ask you all to write something down of, and we've heard some great ideas and also some great opportunities and things to plug into. Just one small thing. One thing you're going to do in the next, say, 2 months. Does that sound like a good?
Mm-hmm.
Can't be too far out, right? Who, what, when. And if you could write it down on that little piece of paper, and we'll actually just have everyone come and stick them up on the board. So we'll invite you up to, once you've written that down, and just come on up and put it on the board. If you can avoid tripping on all this extra stuff over here, I suggest coming this way.
Yeah. Environmental.
Isn't it?
It'll be able to in less than a month.
But isn't that a helpful climate change thing?
It's an action.
And if anybody has a website or social media handle they want to share with the group, I'm happy to add it here. Right here. Here. Go on. Yes. Take a picture of this. Nope, you're all set. Yeah, this is a hazard in there. Thank you. Thank you for that break. If you want to put your website here, go for it.
So,
I
think that.
yes, to go in. Oh.
But also, say a little bit.
Can you read that part? Is that a good thing?
It's not nothing. It's not going to drop the global temperature anything, but you want me to put it up?